We have a list of a number of elected officials who would like to speak. We will start with Senator J.D. Alexander, Chair of the Senate Budget Committee.
I heard there were a couple of questions on funding yesterday, so I decided to stop by. I'll be brief and certainly stand for any question you have. First of all, I absolutely appreciate your individual commitment to our university system and to education for our kids and adults here in Florida. I have believed from my entire life, through my multi-generational family's life, that education is the key to opportunity for all of our citizens, and ultimately, if we're to broaden the economic base to have Florida fulfill the promise that we want, the only way I believe we can do that is through a fantastic quality university system. And for your work here every day, thank you very much for your personal commitment, your work and effort to make that a reality. This project I started on at Chancellor Herbert's suggestion about 12 years ago now. It's been quite a journey. I didn't start off thinking that I didn't even know what a Polytech was. I went to Georgia Tech for 2 years, and then my family dragged me down to Florida and went to school there. I'd never heard of a Polytech. Great leaders like Judy Ginshaft, who came in from a branch campus system to help us make this a reality, dreamed it up. And she went out and found a leader who had experience in this area to come to this campus and make it work. And I have been not only committed to this campus, but as I hope most of all of you know, I've been committed to higher education across the board. I mean, I don't think there's been anything any of you have ever asked me to do to help extend and grow the mission of giving great opportunities to our citizens that I haven't done everything within my ability to make happen, you know, from lots and lots of projects. And I'm proud of being involved as a partner with you in doing these things. To me, this is a fairly small step. You've already determined to develop a Polytechnic campus here in Lakeland, Florida. We've been fortunate. We've had a lot of community support. I think over $40 million in local community support. For my community, that's a lot. That's a lot. But it will do a lot more if we believe that this can become the reality that we know it can be. Now, this isn't a criticism of the current situation. But as Dr. Goodman reported, university presidents, and it takes a while interrelating, have only a degree of, they lead, they don't dictate. And university faculty and faculty leaders are unique folks. And they don't always, they have their own idea about where universities should go. So it's been very challenging to have this new model that Dr. Ginshaft and Dr. Goodman have put forward to be wholly accepted by some of those broader faculty leaders. And that manifests itself in the lack of support for the USF Board of Trustees strategic plan for this campus, which comes forward in the request for the first 15 degree programs, and we get 3. You can't fulfill the promise of a $250 million investment in state and local and private funds with more to come if you can only have 3 degree programs within the strategic plan that's properly approved. You know, recently, and it goes on, and I think ultimately what I've come to is that the mass of USF is focused around programs. And this new alternative approach is just fundamentally at odds with that general consensus of what USF, the organization, is. And as a consequence, I very much support and ask for you to consider it. I think the costs will be very minimal compared to the return for the people of Florida. And I commit to you to continue to work as hard as I can for as long as I'm in office and beyond to help you implement the greatest set of opportunities, unique, different, and wonderful, that can help us grow this state and grow opportunities and, as the governor says, get people back to work. Thank you very much for extending us the time.
Thank you. Representative Kelly Starkey, the chair of the House Innovation Subcommittee. And while you're coming up, your legislative aide was here yesterday. We appreciate her being here and sitting through the hours of the meeting yesterday. And thank you for your support.
Not a problem. I thank you guys for the patience that you've had today. I also thank the Board of Governors for your service to our state and your leadership that's allowed Florida to be a post-secondary education system that is second to none. Your service as well for considering the significant issue that is before us today. I'd also like to thank President Ginshaft for the leadership of the University of South Florida for graciously allowing this discussion to go forward. She has grown USF into a powerhouse on the athletic field, go Bulls, and most importantly in the classroom and in the research field. I rise today to support USF Polytech becoming a separate and an independent university inside the Florida system. I know this has been a long day, and I know many of the speakers have said a lot of the things that I could restate and elaborate on, but I won't in the essence of time. And during my service in the Florida House of Representatives, I have focused on improving the education system in our state. I and my colleagues have sought ways for education to be more innovative, individually tailored, and accountable. And Polytechnic is an embodiment of all of these principles. The inventive educational methods embraced by Polytech will further Florida's goal of being a world leader in preparing its students for the workplace. Chancellor Goodman and his staff have done an amazing job building a top-tier school that will equip students to be successful in a rapidly evolving world of applied sciences. This innovative instruction cannot be found at any other public university in Florida, and therefore Polytechnic fits the state system better as a standalone institution. Further, it is substantially different in its philosophy and delivery of education than the other schools in our state. The university identifies the students' talents, it steers them in areas where they will be prosperous, and it provides them with all the associated tools that they will need to be successful. This individual focus, coupled with the significant cultural differences and a focus on the STEM technology in the Polytechnic Institute, proves a need for autonomy. It is clear that our university system and our state will be better off by establishing an independent Polytech university. So concise, but we really need your support. Thank you.
Thank you. And Representative Seth McNeil, the House Appropriations Committee.
Thank you very much, Chair and Chair Parker. Thank you for your time. Chancellor Brogan, it's great to be with you again. Thank you for the time that you're giving me to address this. I'm going to be brief in my remarks, but also at the end of my remarks, read to you a letter which was asked that I do so by another member of the House, a dear friend of mine, and I'll get to that as soon as I finish. But I think, members, that I have a unique perspective as it relates to this, the issue that you're being asked to talk about. Clearly, I have a statewide perspective. Chancellor Brogan and I have been in the trenches with your support and your leadership in resolving what was a historic dispute between the legislature and the board. And I think I'm proud of the vision that we came together and achieved to bring resolution to that issue. In my legislative service, one of the more exciting and fun things that I get to do is chair the group of legislators in the House that make up the Gator Caucus. And President Matchin, that's been a lot of fun. I'm a Gator. My wife is a USF Bull, and we have allegiances across the system. In my regional service to the state, I have the opportunity to chair both the Hillsborough legislative delegation That's the official delegation of members from Hillsborough County, as well as the unofficial delegation, the Bay Area Legislative Delegation, which represents nearly a third of the members of the legislature. In my struggle, frankly, to decide a purpose for the Bay Area Legislative Delegation, what I settled on was encouraging the Bay Area Legislative Delegation to support the major economic drivers of our region, the West Central Florida region. And so we've endeavored on a mission to do that, and those being MacDill Air Force Base, the University of South Florida in Tampa, the Moffitt Cancer Center in Tampa, and the major economic drivers, the Port of Tampa, legislative efforts that are the regional economic drivers for West Central Florida. So my point to you is that from a regional perspective, I acknowledge the professionalism and the expertise and frankly the economic drive that President Genshaft, her board of trustees, and the entire university system bring to our region. And I thank you, President Genshaft, for your leadership. And it has been nothing short of my pleasure to watch USF grow, and it's been nothing short of my wife's pleasure, frankly, to watch USF grow. But I want to talk to you a little bit today about my home, and my home's in Polk County. And these members of the legislature are all coming to you today to talk a little bit about our home, because one of the challenges, my family's been in Lakeland for 5 generations. One of the challenges of all of the folks in every one of those generations has been that people who are in Lakeland or in Polk County typically leave our county to go somewhere else because that's where there's opportunity for jobs. And so if I could leave one mark on my service as a legislator to my county, my home, that is to change that culture and to transform the knowledge base of the community where I grew up. So from that mission and that vision, that's what Dr. Genshaft, Dr. Goodman brought to me several years ago with the idea of a polytechnic. And I said to Dr. Goodman at the time, that's what we've been looking for. What he presented to you before, that's what we've been looking for. That's what we've been looking for in our region to transform the knowledge base, because I'm never going to extricate myself from that situation of my friends and my colleagues leaving our community and going somewhere else to find opportunity unless I, as a leader, do a good job of ensuring that the knowledge base of my community is transformed. And that's what we're talking to you about today. Because these folks who stood up a few minutes ago, many of whom I traveled with today, have invested in our community. They're entrepreneurs in our community. They've brought their capital to our community. And I believe the community which treats capital best is the community that's going to expand and the community that's going to thrive. And I can tell you, when I seized on the opportunity to support an institution that will transform the knowledge base of my community, and that will allow opportunity for my friends and my colleagues, and that will allow opportunity for these business people who have invested in my community to expand their businesses, grow opportunity, and bring more jobs to my community, that's a vision and a mission that I can absolutely support. The challenge, as has been brought forward, is what we're talking about historically hasn't fit in the boxes which we want to place higher education in. And we want to do something a little bit different. And as you said, we can't, as was said earlier, and I'll try not to be too verbose, we can't see the vision of creating the breadth and the extent of the programs that we want to create to really transform the knowledge base of my community under the current system and the current structure. And that's what we're talking about today. So I hope that my comments to you today are sincere, they're from the heart, they're simply talking about my community and the opportunity to transform the knowledge base of my community and my home. Most importantly, I want to thank you for the service that you provide to our state. Unlike Senator Alexander and Representative Stargell and me, you're not paid for the service that you provided the state, but we thank you for what you do. I, as one, going back to my original conversation, acknowledge the important role that you play in the direction and setting policy for our 11 universities, hopefully our 12 universities. I appreciate the service, and I also appreciate the time that you spend away from your businesses and away from your families to serve your state. So thank you very much from the bottom of my heart, and thank you for the opportunity to say hello to you. With that, my dear friend, Representative Grimsley, who chairs the House Budget Committee, has written a letter, I think, to Chair Parker, and she requested that I read this letter. So at her request, I'm going to endeavor to read this letter. So it says, "Dear Chair Parker, during the last year, you've spent considerable time in strategic planning sessions discussing how the state university system should organize itself to meet Florida's growing student population and economic demands. I believe today's presentation on the University of South Florida Polytechnic's future in the state university system comes at a very appropriate time. My legislative district encompasses Hendry, Highlands, Glades County, and I am a strong supporter of access to higher education for those living in rural areas. Unfortunately, the needs and wants of a larger community typically prevail over those of a rural area, and this is why I wholeheartedly support the conversation of permitting USF Polytechnic to become an independent university. The University of South Florida system is predominantly located within Florida's West Coast counties, notably larger, more urban areas of our state. As such, representation on U.S. Board of Trustees strongly favors the needs and priorities of those larger communities and is less representative of the needs and priorities of the communities I've been elected to serve. As an independent university, the Polytechnic will have its own Board of Trustees made up of strong statewide leaders representing a more diverse community base. With that said, providing access to a high-tech, STEM-related education to students across the state is also a key priority of mine. The Polytechnic model, with its focus on applied learning and a highly focused curriculum, will certainly provide these degrees, as well as serve as an economic engine for not only the Central Florida region, but our state as a whole. Florida needs to put in place a more highly diversified economy consisting of a well-educated workforce and the availability to offer high-skill, high-wage jobs. The Polytechnic model, although new to Florida, has a highly successful and impressive track record of doing so in other states. It is my belief that as an independent university, USF Polytechnic will be able to more quickly and efficiently provide STEM-focused degrees to students, respond to industry-specific needs, and start to broaden the economy of this great state of Florida. Sincerely, Denise Grimsley, Representative District 77. With that, members, thank you again for your time, and thank you for your service to our state.
Thank you. At this point, we will turn the discussion to the board, to the committee and other board members on the presentation. Anyone wants to lead off?
I'll make a motion. I think one of the speakers asked that we move this forward today, that we make a motion and ask that we staff this out so we can get the information we need to make a informed decision on this and do the due diligence we need to do, and I think certainly we ought to do that. So I would make that motion. And then I have a couple comments if there's a second to the motion.
Second.
First of all, I'd like to thank Representative McKeel and Representative Sargel and to hear from Representative Grimsley, who's a Cane, but obviously very fond of her hometown area, and Senator Alexander for their comments and their support of higher education. They have been very, very supportive of higher education, and I personally, and I know all of us, are very appreciative of this. I think to do the due diligence we need some financial information. I was hopeful that we would have that to support anything that we are going to do. We need some information on how a transition would take place. I'd like to hear from President Ginshaft and their board and whether they support this or not. And I'd like perhaps this would be a brand new university, and the governor has put out some new ideas that on higher education and faculty hiring that are worth discussion, and they certainly have caught. I think it's. President Barron's already had a very thoughtful response to some of this, and so we have a new university. And if I was the governor, I'd say, listen, I put out some ideas. Where does this new university stand on all this? So I think we ought to have that in play as well. So, but I think this is definitely something exciting, and we ought to talk about it. So that's the reasons for my motion.
Just a couple comments on the motion. I think that there is a lot to talk about here, and a lot to talk about, and it might be, and it's something of this magnitude. Probably the whole board will want to set aside enough time and make sure that we are very clear with the various groups on what we're looking for in order to make a decision. The one aspect that wasn't, and I'm sitting next to the student representative here, so I'm sure he's going to comment, but I'm thinking about the students and what is the degree and how does that transition work? I know they commented on the transition, but when we get back together, I'd like to better understand how that process works, how you go from one school to another over time, and if there's dual degrees or what happens. But I hope that would be addressed as well.
And I would like to add to them, if we could have this back in November, so we do this in the November meeting, I think that'd be great. I would like to add that to my motion. You have no objection to a second?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, Governor Hussein.
I certainly like the previous item we have. We really owe it to them to explore this issue. As Dr. Marshall said, STEM is near and dear to my heart. Dr. Goodman, you mentioned something about $200 million that we've got. One of the biggest concerns we have is funding, because our legislators beat the dickens out of us every time we go and meet with them, try to get, and I don't blame them because they look at their coffers, how much money they have. As you know, the state has a shortfall. So they're trying to do their job. They've done a great job for us to fund our issues, but we also try to be doing our fiduciary job of trying to give them the best for their money. You said there's a $200 million is in place right now. Can you elaborate on that?
Yes, I'd be glad to. That comes from a combination of funds. Some are federal funds that came out of President Obama's federal effort, and we use that to build a 6-mile road through the Williams property, which is adjacent to the USFP property. The Tollway Authority has widened what's called the Polk Parkway, built an exit ramp, and you'd be surprised how much an exit ramp off of a parkway costs today. I certainly was surprised. I think that was $35 million just for those exits, and there was about $8 million from the Williams Company of private money in there as well. In addition, our county has put well over $100 million of its road money through its road tax into building new roads on the campus, one we call the Ring Road, which goes completely around the campus, as well as building all of the exterior roads leading to that campus. That includes a road called Berkeley, Pace Road, and then, as I said, some of the interior roads as well. So it's really taken a number of years and monumental efforts of the legislative delegation, of Polk County, and the Tollway Authority all coming together, and the federal government, to bring that money together for infrastructure.
So that's just great. And I understand infrastructure costs huge being in that business. And I know we got $35 million appropriated this last year for the first building.
That was the end piece of the first building. First building cost is slightly over $60 million. It's a science and technology building. That $35 million was the finishing piece because, as you well know in this room, the state breaks up a lot of those buildings over several years so it can maximize its dollars, and that certainly was our case as well.
How many square feet that would be?
It's about 160,000 gross square feet.
How many students, classrooms?
We have the facilities person here who probably is better to...
That's okay. Let me go forward.
Okay.
So what's next?
What's next is we're looking for private funding or bond money for a residential hall, 150 beds, so we can have that destination campus and move away from being just a commuter campus. We have already received from the private donors, a number of whom are sitting here, over $11 million for what we call our Wellness Center, which acts also, it has classrooms and would serve as the student union, food services for the campus. So those three are the beginning building blocks of the university.
Okay, thank you.
Governor Perez?
Thank you, Chair. This is probably more a question for the Chancellor. I'm fully supportive of the motion. I think we should take a good hard look at this, and the numbers are certainly going to be fascinating. And I wasn't going to say anything until Governor Colson said November. Chancellor, we're looking at a whole bunch of issues in November, and do we have the staff, or how much interplay will our staff have in helping craft the responses and the actual financial plan? And some of the questions that Governor Colson properly raised, is November a reasonable deadline? Can we staff it? I don't want to, I want to look at these issues, and I think it's an important conversation. I just want to make sure our November meeting is getting very, very big as it is.
Yeah, you know, this gives me an opportunity to say this. Should come as no surprise that following a conversation on the addition of the potential addition of a dental school and the importance and the monumental scope of that decision, that adding a 12th state university is again at a higher level of complexity and importance and urgency to do a good job in that regard. This is not new. You know, we've been working with the Polytech long before I became chancellor of the state university system, and I think that's important for all of us to recognize that unlike the dental school, and I mean this respectfully about the dental programs, this is an issue that has been being dealt with between University of South Florida and the Board of Governors now for, somebody help me, 5 years? 10 years. 10 years. So it is not a new issue. Now, that certainly doesn't relieve us of the obligation to put the pencil to this as we're looking at this next monumental decision, which is, does this become the 12th state university of Florida, to have to satisfy appropriately a Board of Governors who has the constitutional responsibility in partnership with the legislature at the other end of the pipe to make that decision. So in answer to your question, what we will now do is put forth a list of questions. That's the easy thing to do, is ask the questions. But again, continue to rely on the University of South Florida, inclusive of the Polytech campus, to put together a profile to return to you by November, Governor, that will do the best possible job of examining all of those hard questions that have got to be answered successfully in order to make a decision, the likes of which you're looking at today. So we will begin to work with them immediately, take all of the work that has been done leading up to this point, and that is some of the good news. We're not starting with a blank sheet of paper, but now get down to brass tacks and really dig into the business plan, the academic program plan, all those major elements that go into making a decision, the likes of which you're looking at today. So we will do our absolute very best. We can, by November, guarantee you we will bring you the best we can provide to you. Will that be enough will be determined based on the interaction and the ultimate choice of the Board of Governors.
Just the follow-up, and I'm sure you'll know this, Chancellor. If not, I'm sure the legislators will. Assuming we get all that information, assuming we go forward, is there a timetable? Does it require legislative action? I mean, what is the process from that point forward?
Yes, if in fact the Board of Governors were to approve this in November, then it would go immediately into the legislative cycle because, again, it does require that partnership to identify it here and then to fund it and appropriately organize it by way of designation by the legislature. Yes, sir.
So that just amends our LBR to that extent in some way, shape, or form?
In some way, shape, or form. To be determined, but yes, sir.
Governor Starburst and Duncan.
I have to make this comment. With all the years serving on boards, I want to commend the presenters for a great presentation, commend the legislators. Senator, you come from a great family. I served on a board with your mother, and I just think the Alexander family has done a great number of things for this state. I appreciate your comments. In all the years serving on these boards, a couple of years chairing the Florida State Foundation, where we raised $302 million, chairing the USF Foundation for 2 years, where we raised $270 million, 4 years on the Board of Governors, where at every meeting we talk about the lack of funding for our 11 universities. I wonder how a 12th university would affect the other 11 universities and how we can expand the base for more funding. I've not heard that yet. How do we get more funding for our 11, now 12 universities? How would we get the funding? It's been a problem, and I've not heard a solution. I think we should always look to the future, and certainly Polytechnic, technical university would certainly be an asset, as all our 11 universities are. So I would like to get more information, Chancellor, about how we're going to fund this university and how is it going to affect the funding for the other 11 universities.
If I might, Mr. Chairman, very important point, and something I probably should have mentioned in my original comments. One of the things that we need to do is closely examine this particular issue. But at the same time, remember that not only do we have 11 other existing institutions, there are a rather large number of branch campuses scattered all over the state of Florida who could make, while different, a compelling, similar case for their institution. I'm actually in conversation with one of the branch campus leaders of the USF system on this very issue about going into the business of lower division coursework. And in my humble opinion, the idea being that that is a natural ascendancy move toward ultimately independence. Independence is a wonderful thing, but if you play this out to the extreme, can you visualize the day and time where Florida boasts 25 universities? This one is a very unique request based on what it is proposing, it being a pejorative term, I don't mean it to be, but we also have to be mindful of the existing 11, and we also need to be very careful that we are not unintentionally giving off a domino opportunity for others to simply say, okay, all we have to do is come forward, propose something unique, get legislative support, get community support, and put in place our next request to do exactly the same thing. Because at the end of the day, it's a lot more fun to be an independent institution than it is part of a system. There's no question about that. While I do this, and while we do this, we've got to wrestle with those issues simultaneously to make sure that it is held to a the Polytech, that as we consider it, we hold it to a very high standard, and I think the people associated with USF and the Polytech would expect that, of why this particular request, and some of the comments made today do that. But make sure that it is held to such a standard that we are not unintentionally paving the way for what could become an Oklahoma land rush of people coming in saying, me too. Because this isn't about independence. Independence is easy, as I told the campus director that I spoke with. It's just a governance issue. You change the marquee in the front of the building. We're seeing a great deal of that in the Florida college system right now. It's easy to change the sign in the front of the building. It is expensive, but easy to change those green signs on I-95. And I'm awash in a sea of pop rivets these days as I drive up and down Florida's roadways by seeing redesignated institutions that offer 2 baccalaureate degrees but are now colleges and state colleges. I sound passionate about this because I am. We have to trod carefully here, not on the Polytech just per se. We have to carefully look at the organizational structure of the public higher education system in the state of Florida, lest we make expedited decisions that ultimately have unintended and mass consequences. So you have my commitment, and I heard it today, you have the commitment of USF and of the Polytech, that we will absolutely and carefully work together to look at this issue and make sure that what we come back to you in November with is really done well and done right. And again, hearing the representatives of the Polytech and USF today, I have no doubt that they'll be great partners in making sure that that's the case.
Dr. Summers, do you want to follow up?
Chancellor, I concur with your comments. There's a state senator from Pinellas County who has told the media that if Lakeland wants to be an independent university, then I may want St. Petersburg campus to become an independent university. So your comments are well taken, and it is something we have to be very careful about.
Okay. Governor Duncan?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. And again, I apologize not being a member of the committee, but I think I have a little unique perspective in that I actually was on the USF board site selection committee that picked this campus for Lakeland. And I've been a chair of a regional campus for USF and have been on this board for a while now. And I think that it's important that we do look through all of these issues and talk about them. As I've read some of the comments and the clips and some of the different other opinions, though, I think as the staff goes and looks at this, we need to be very clear about the cost issue. There's a cost issue to Polytechnic, which I think we have already kind of bought into as a system. And then there's the cost of the administrative functions of the 12th university that I think we need to understand what they are, but I continue to believe, and this is not going to be a surprise to anybody to hear me say this, that there are business models that we can employ in this system that can actually make that a very cost-effective thing. And I would encourage Mr. Goodman to maybe get with President Delaney or President Benz. I remain convinced that there's an opportunity for similar-sized institutions to maybe better leverage some of their systems. I would argue we possibly don't need a 12 PeopleSoft system. You might be able to buy those services, whether it's from USF or from North Florida, that we can do this in a very cost-effective way. And so I would really encourage the staff to make sure that that part of it and those issues and questions are being brought into the equation.
Okay, thank you. Sir Alexander, you're back. You want to comment?
Well, I'm just available to the committee if you want me to speak to any of the funding issues. But first of all, I'll point out that the current budget of Polytech, USF Polytech, is all in about $41 million, $28 million base funding plus tuition. So it's not like there's not already a substantial budget in place providing services to students that will continue. So to Governor Duncan's point, the question in my mind is what are those incremental costs of the independence administration of those things versus not. I think those incremental costs, and I've asked the Senate Education Budget staff to begin to study that, and we have, they seem to be a fairly manageable amount of money. In fact, I would guess that the interest cost on one of these fine parking structures next door might be greater than those costs. And would also point out that at least for the first 5,000 students, there won't be any parking garages needed on this particular facility. So when you put all things in balance, I think you'll find that there really aren't as many cost differentials as you might think. Then the issue gets to, well, where are we going to put the enrollment of our state? And I would tell you as a legislator, as a leader in budgets, that question comes down less to this amorphous sort of a decision about the whole system, but more specifically about what you as the Board of Governors or these universities are proposing in terms of tangible programs that can change the lives of the people of Florida and grow our economy. And I would tell you that if you come up and just say, we need more money, that's one discussion. If you come up and say, we've got a Polytech that can revolutionize this set of training and help to grow the economy, that's another thing. Whether it's at Polytech or at University of Florida International University or any other university, I think that's a fundamentally different discussion. And unfortunately, sometimes in the bureaucracy of the talk, we just talk about these little high-level things. I think the things that many of my colleagues and I are looking for are, what are we going to invest our money in? Don't just tell me you need more money, because quite frankly, if we really scrub the numbers, there could be degree programs that somebody can't find a job in, and maybe we need to refocus what we're doing. That's what we hope that y'all are hard working at, trying to make this thing work. But the discussion of whether or not there's more available funding comes down to, well, what are you really asking for? And if you make a compelling case that a set of spending will advance the economy of Florida, help grow the quality of life of our state, I can tell you every one of us here and every one of us in Tallahassee are going to go out there and help you be a good partner and figure out how to fund that, whatever that is. And yes, there are issues. You know, we're looking at gross receipts tax or sagging. In the last several years, we've put additional funding into PICO to help meet that need. Clearly, we must meet the need for our maintenance of existing facilities. And I've worked with you to meet the needs of those existing facilities. I can't tell you you can just snap a magic wand and it's all fixed. But I can tell you, if you bring a compelling case to the Florida legislature how the people of Florida will be advanced by these actions, how we can put them back to work and stop our 12% unemployment, we'll figure it out for you. And you have my absolute commitment to do that.
Governor Long, then to Governor Temple.
Thank you, Governor Martin. Just going to switch the conversation a little bit and bring a student's perspective in here. The student body president from University of South Florida Polytechnic conducted a survey for her students. About 15% of the student body responded. Unfortunately, there wasn't a great deal of time for the survey to go out before the meeting. But of that survey, 85% of the students wanted to remain as part of the University of South Florida. The main reason for that is because the main reason they said they came to the University of South Florida was to be a part of the USF brand. That's what drew them there. Their main concern right now is the job outlook. When you're bringing a new university into the mix, they don't have the recognition nationally or in the state. They're Polytechnic, not USF. So they want to make sure that once they graduate, they have a diploma that will get them a job. The 4 years that they spend getting an education will benefit them and help them have job opportunities and move them forward with their life. So one thing the student government at University of South Florida Polytechnic wanted me to communicate was, if this were to go through in this transition, the dedication to the seamless transition that was mentioned in the presentation, that dedication needs to be there. There needs to be some way to make sure these students either receive the USF name on their diploma for the students that are currently enrolled as USF Polytechnic students. Maybe that's an opportunity, but something needs to be done to make sure that these students who have spent a lot of time already at the campus and a lot of money getting that education are going to graduate with opportunities in front of them.
Governor Temple.
Yeah, I've been on this board since the start, as you all know. There's a disconnect here, Judy, and this started out to be a great land opportunity. Somebody's going to give us a lot of land. It's going to have a lot of improvements, which it has. It was going to be a branch campus. Now, somehow, I'm waking up now, and if I missed it, I apologize, but I don't think it's ever been really communicated, and I know we've got a lot of new governors here who are not part of that process, but I got to tell you, I'm scratching my head. As part of our study, I'm going to request that we go through the history, because I don't even understand how a Polytechnic Institute helps the state of Florida. You know, I've got this thing here that says we've got some kind of comparison between Cal Poly, Berkeley, UCLA. I mean, I don't understand that. That doesn't. I want to know how Polytechnic Institutes help the state of Florida. Is it like Cal Poly versus California? So that's my first. I mean, I think this whole board, including myself, has got to be brought up to speed on this. Chancellor, if we're going to do this study right, because I just don't understand it. Secondly, I can appreciate the hometown legislatures wanting this. I mean, this is, it'd be wonderful to have this facility. It'd be wonderful for the community. It would be wonderful for economic development. I wish you had all sat in yesterday to our facilities meeting where we talked about PICO, and we talked about the fact that all of our PICO money all went to Cal Poly, and we can't fix our roofs. We were talking earlier about a dental school. We got a world-class dental school at the University of Florida that needs fixing up, and there's a lot of advantages to doing that. So I would just urge you to, you hometown legislators to sit in and understand what our problems are, one, and help us. I mean, if we're going to go forward with this, there's got to be a different funding source, or our roofs are all going to leak and our buildings are going to fall apart. So I think that's got to be, and it was brought up earlier, but that's got to be part of this study.
Okay, Governor Rood, then Governor Hussain.
Okay, I think it's clear there's a lot more questions, and I think we're probably not going to get those answered. So I would like to call the question.
Okay, since you called my name. Since I called your name.
I need to say something too.
There's a call for the question. I don't really want to cut off debate, but at the same time, I want to make sure that what is
That's what a call for the question does.
I realize that.
There's no debate on a call for the question.
That's right. Just a comment from Pat. I think she needs to remind us of something.
Yeah,
Okay,
I
let's have a.
It's an important comment.
It's an important comment. You yield to.
Of course, I'll always yield. I will withdraw then, I guess, my question. Is that how you do it?
1 second
Yes,
comment.
I just withdraw.
Just for a couple of minutes, yeah.
Hold it.
Okay.
You need you to mic. If he's
For
gonna
1 second comment, I think the idea is fabulous. I think when you're looking at curriculum and you're going to be doing something very unique, it's great for the state, it's great for the system and so forth. But John, you did say we should hear about the history. I think it's important for all of us, because some of us have only been on this board for a year or so. And also, I think we need to really hear everything in the November meeting, because it's my understanding that some of the governors are going off the board after this year is up. And then we will have to start all over again with a new history. So I really encourage you, if some of you sitting here are going off the board, that either we let them stay on, or we extend your terms, or we come up with a history and we make a decision whether we want this or we don't want it now, because I think we have 5 members who are going to go off the board comes January. So that was my comment.
Okay, with that, let's call the vote, and then if we have some additional discussion afterwards, let's go ahead and so the motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 Those opposed? Okay, motion carries. Move
But,
forward.
Mr. Chairman, can I make a comment?
Well, we passed it.
Just a quick comment. Dr. Goodman, we're really looking for efficiency in our system. Mr. Temple, brought up a very good point. To be fair to the legislators, we had money in our budget for our maintenance. They approved it. When he went to the governor, he got vetoed. So the $35 million was separate from the rest of it. So we did get that. But Dr. Goodman, we're looking for efficiency. We're looking for a STEM. Can you put all of that together? When you come back to us, give us something unique, something that we can say, this is different. This is going to produce different program. It's going to give us a lot of STEM. We need a STEM. We need a STEM in this state, to have more job, more higher paying job for our state. Thank you.
Thank you.
Governor Parker.
My only comment is that, and again, I also want to thank the Senator and the members of the House for participating with us in a dialogue today and the fine folks from Polk County. guess the one direction and the reason I wanted to speak for a moment is I, like John, have been here from the beginning, and it's been a part of most of this conversation. I see this as a question of whether it's best for the state of Florida for one of our branch campuses to serve as an independent institution. And I see that is, I agree that it's somewhat different from the bigger conversation that I know that we are having across the state regarding the makeup of our system. And I guess I would just, ask, as staff looks at this, Chancellor Brogan, it's a question to me about kind of more of what Moria was saying. It's not so much about what this does for Polk County in that area, but what this change does for the state of Florida. And it's a question about whether or not within our system it makes sense for us to continue our investment in a current institution or current entity that we have, but continue it as an independent, because it will provide a unique benefit to the citizens of the state of Florida. If you can find a way to kind of craft that based upon the differences or the different things that it can do as a Polytech institute versus what we currently have with our other institutions, that's more the question for me versus whether, as we realign the entire system, how does it fit in? So I guess it's a more pointed question for me, given the resources that we've already invested. And and I differ a little bit, with all due respect. I don't know if it's President Goodman, I guess is your title, in that I'm not so much interested in the entire. In some ways, what you had given me was like just another 12. Just another institution that's kind of more like others and all the student life and the things that you talked about. I guess I'm more interested in that laser part of your approach, that if we're going to make this investment, that it is going to be that very unique offering that we don't currently have based upon our need for STEM and our need for higher paying degrees. So I'm looking more for that versus something that, almost any of our other existing branch campuses have. So I just, if we can kind of speak to that for me, I'd appreciate it.
Governor Beard.
Yeah, I just want to kind of finish it up. I'm in kind of a unique position. I graduated from Georgia Tech, and I sit on the Georgia Tech Foundation Board, so I understand what a Polytech University is. I understand what Georgia Tech is. I understand what Georgia Tech did for Atlanta, and Atlanta wouldn't be Georgia Tech. Atlanta wouldn't be Atlanta without Georgia Tech as Georgia Tech, not as a branch of the University of Georgia. I was also chair of the University of South Florida Board for 5 years. I worked with JD in the process of finding this site. As a matter of fact, I almost got killed one afternoon in a car wreck over there looking for sites. Thank God I didn't. But so I've put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into USF Polytech. Frankly, it's my position now, being on this board and trying to figure out what this university system is going to do with the existing roofs, but more importantly, maybe what this university system is going to do with the students that we're going to have coming down the road in the next 20 years, which right now the plan doesn't accommodate that. And frankly, because of the legislature's funding for USF Polytech, we've got a facility that can grow, that's got funding in place. And I don't think USF Polytech can fund it to the extent that this plan is talking about. So we do need to understand the plan and what they're saying. But at the same time, it can't be the vision that the senator has and the chancellor over there has, unless it's separate. And so with that, I think the next couple of months, we've got an awful lot of work to do, but I'm hopeful that President Genshaft and can figure out a plan that'll work for the students and for the conversion, if that's what we want to call it, to the next university. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, I'd like to end the Strategic Planning Committee. As we look for November, we spent 8 hours the past 2 days on 3 very critical issues that we'll be coming back to the board in various forms at the next meeting. So the Strategic Planning Committee will be very busy, and we have to identify the appropriate time to have the discussion of all these items prior to either the day before our meeting, or maybe we have a standalone meeting. But we have a lot of key issues that we will be addressing as you come back with the information that has been asked for. Thank you for your perseverance today, the last 2 days. And with that, the meeting is adjourned.